Hello, you're welcome. This is literature. Like I said, I want to talk about elements of poetry. Let me quickly say something. I have always known that not so many people rather, love to hear about literature. Not so many people understand literature. Not so many people enjoy sitting down to be taught anything that has to do with literature. And like I would always tell my students, I don't blame people like this. We are trying. We are trying so much to make students of this generation, to understand the importance of literature. I don't know about you. I don't know about any other person, but I know very well that while we grew up, in fact, I came to know what literature is about during my days in the university. And then I always asked, is this how, or rather, yes, is this how interesting this discipline is? And then the teachers who taught us literature back days in school, they messed it up. They made us they made us see literature as a subject where you just come, read, analyze, and go. But there are a whole lot of things that a person is expected to learn from literature. uh, I would always tell my students that if you see a person, if you see anybody who is a lover of literature, if you see anybody who read literature very well, you wouldn't need to be told. There is a way this person reasons. The way you view things is not the way this person views things. Literature has a whole lot to do on the way a person reasons. Literature has a whole lot to do with the way a person sees things. Literature always influences minds. Take note of that. And then when you come into this literature, the moment you mention poetry, even people who love literature, the moment you mention poetry, there are people who will shy away from it. There are people who do not love to hear about it. But believe me, poetry is another part of literature that is very enjoyable. I am not exempting myself. Myself, there are times I don't like to talk about poetry or to read things about poetry. Even in the course I read in school, whenever you give me an assignment that has to do with poetry, it's usually very heavy for me. I understand that. But poetry is also very interesting. That is, if you have that sound mind to understand poetry very well. Okay, now remember that when you talk about poetry, in literature, considering the three branches of literature, poetry is closer to music. Yes, it is. Poems are meant to be sung. They are meant to be listened to. And when you talk about poetry, poetry has to do with release of deep emotions using elevated language. Somebody will define poetry as there are books where, poetry is defined as the overflow of spontaneous emotions recaptured in tranquility. I don't always advise my students to go for this. It is correct, but because of the, do I use the word, the cumbersomeness of that definition, students might not be able to use it when analyzing poems. So I take it that my students simply understand poetry as the expression of deep feelings using elevated language, using grand language. Okay, this poetry has types. We are going to talk about that. But right here, I want us to talk about the elements of poetry. That is to say, things you are expected to look out for. If you understand the types of poems, if you understand poetry, understand the types, and understand the elements, understand the things you are expected to look out for when you are analyzing a poem, you begin to enjoy poems when you see them. Okay, now, the elements of poetry, these are features. These are things you are expected to look out for in poems. Remember, if you talk about poetry, poetry is a word used to talk about the collection of poems. Okay, now, the first one is the mood. You come across a word like the mood, just like you know what is mood, the way you feel, the way a person feels. There are times maybe you want to raise a discussion, or you want to there are ways you act towards a person, and you hear somebody telling you, please, I am not in that mood, meaning my state of mind now cannot permit that. Mood simply means a speaker's or a writer's state of mind. That is the way the person feels at the point, at that time that the person is writing that poem. You can get to know the mood of a writer by reading their poem. Just the same way you can get to know the mood of a person by listening to them when they speak. Take, for instance, that time when somebody calls you on phone, you're not seeing the person, you can't see the person's face, but somebody calls you on phone and begins the call with, "Hello, dear." If a call begins like this, "Hello, dear," you immediately get to know that this person's mood is bright. There is a way a person begins a conversation on phone, and you find yourself asking the person, "What is the cause of the joy? What is the cause of the happiness?" You sound elated. You can't see the person's face, but through their tone, you know. Now, mood is a person's state of mind, the state of mind of a writer or a speaker. And you can get to know about this as you read the person's words. So understand it whenever you talk about mood. It's very simple. Forget the big worded definitions that books present. Simply, mood is the writer's or the speaker's state of mind, how the person feels. Was the person angry when the person was writing this? Was the person happy? Does the mood have to do, does the person's feeling connect with joy, optimism, hopelessness, and the rest of them? These are things that, just the same way you know, the kind of feelings that you know. Does the person sound sad? Does the person sound disappointed? Does the person sound, and the rest of them? That is mood. Simple. And then when you talk about the tone, tone then means the manner of expression, the manner of presentation. Now, when you have known the person's feeling, when you have known the person's state of mind, the next thing is, how does the person sound? What words does the person use? How does this person sound? Manner of expression. A person who is angry, for instance, tends to sound harsh. A person who is happy tends to sound, what do I use there? The person who is happy tends to sound bright. Now, the person's tone is usually welcoming. The person's tone is usually joyous. Tone is just the way the person sounds, manner of expression. The mood is the state of mind. Then the tone is how the person presents what the person is saying. Somebody who, for instance, is writing, maybe you read a poem about, there is this poem, A Government Driver on His Retirement. A poem talking about a driver who serves for the number of years that a government worker is expected to serve as a driver. And throughout that period, this driver was, yes, I should use was, this driver was submissive. This driver complied with the rules until that very last day that the driver is to go on retirement. A government driver on his retirement. The driver, out of joy, goes to drink. He becomes drunk, and on the way kills himself. He has an accident on the way. Now, if you read that poem, the title is A Government Driver on His Retirement by Onu Chibike Kensel. You can find that. Now, if you read that poem, you find out that the narrator there, the poet, the tune there is that of disappointment. The poet is disappointed in the kind of driver, in the kind of person that the driver is. You were pretending all the while to know the rules, and at the end, you flout it, thereby killing yourself. So understanding that tune, that mood is the state of mind, tune is the manner of expression. Okay, now the next one is diction. I want to add a little thing here. Most books will just say, and most teachers will just say that diction refers to the choice of words, the writer's choice of words. I am of the opinion that definition is too limited. If you just say the writer's choice of words, then what about a situation where that writer chooses the words and the words of the writer become ambiguous? There is something about ambiguity in literature. Ambiguity, in fact, not even in literature. There is something about ambiguity. When you say something and that thing that you said can be interpreted in different ways, that thing seems to have different meanings depending on who listens to it. Now, that is why I cannot just say that diction is the writer's choice of words. I take it rather that diction is the writer's choice, arrangement, and use of words to drive home a particular message. Now, the writer chooses the words. Now, there can be a group of words. You choose those words, and the message you use the words to drive will not be the message I will use them to drive when I choose the same words. That is why I choose to define this as the choice, arrangement, and use of words to drive home a particular message by the writer. That is diction, choice, arrangement, and the use of words to drive home a particular message. And the next one, we have rhyme. I think because of time, I wouldn't want the video to be too long. I am going to stop it here and let these ones come in another video. Okay, rhyme. Sometimes we hear rhyme. Take note. Students tend to be confused. There is a word like this, and there is a word like this. Know when you're talking about rhyme and when you're talking about rhythm. Rhythm, okay, rhythm is here. This is rhyme. There is no TH in the middle, just like what you have here. So know which one you're talking about at a particular time. Okay, now rhyme is that situation where you find a poet or sometimes a singer. Musicians do that. Rappers, they do it. You see singers, you see musicians using words that sound alike within the lines of their songs. It beautifies works. It beautifies poems. It beautifies songs. You see them using words that sound alike. Whenever you see something like this, it is rhyme. We define it as the use of similar sounding words. Yes, you can take it that way. Or the use of similar sounds within the line of a poem. Some will tell you that this use of similar sounds occur especially at the last line, at the last point of the lines of a poem. But understanding that whenever you talk about rhyme, to rhyme means words sound alike. And then after rhyme, there is something known as rhyme scheme. Let me use something to take the both of them together. Okay, imagine, let me use this poem. There is this popular nursery poem. Let's say this poem where you have twinkle, twinkle, little star. You should know that. Twinkle, twinkle, little, let me just use the last word, little star. How I wonder what you are. The last word here is are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. If you take a look at these words, if you take a look at what you have here, star, are, high, sky, there is rhyme there. Star, are. Now, this poem is rhymed. But when you talk about rhyme scheme, people also get confused about this. When you talk about rhyme scheme, there is a way you determine that you work on the rhyme scheme of a poem. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, you use the last word. The last word here is star. When the first word, or rather, the last word in the first line, always consider it as A. I'm talking about rhyme scheme now. Consider it as A, star. Then check the last word in the second line. Does it sound like the first one? Does it sound like this? If it does, then bring down that A again. If it doesn't, it becomes B. But in this case, star, they sound alike. Therefore, you have AA. Now, high, does it sound like this? No. The sound here is this. But the sound here is this. High. Now, this becomes B. Like a diamond in the sky. What we have here is sky. Therefore, it should be B. Now, this poem has a second stanza. Men who travel in the dark. Thank you for your little spark. They would not know which way to go if you do not twinkle show. If you do not twinkle show. Now, you do the same thing and rhyme it down. This is what you mean by rhyme and rhyme scheme. We're going to be stopping here. Thank you so much for being there. Remember, I always plead, if it is possible, if you have a way of inviting, especially secondary school students, these are people I really wish to reach out to. I know that in so many schools, in so many places, students do not understand literature. I'm saying what I'm saying with regards to literature teachers in so many places, I understand. But you have to understand also that there are many of us who do not really understand, do not really know how to pass literature across, the knowledge of literature across, how to make students understand that literature is one of the most important subjects. These are my targets. If you have a way, if you know any, you can just invite them. Try as much as you can, bring up students to learn what we do here. I do what I do for free, and I do them having in mind that students out there will benefit from this page and remember this page for this. Once again, thank you so much. You are always appreciated.